Welcome, one and all. My name is Anna Lempriere. I work for the Cornwall Memory Cafe Network, supporting carers and people living with dementia to access services, make referrals, and really help them find a way to get more support. This is part of Disability Cornwall, and we've decided to create this podcast interviewing experts and people with lived experience on dementia to be able to share all sorts of interesting and informative and supportive information. So sit back and enjoy, and also share the podcast with your friends. It's relaxed and inclusive and welcoming, and thank you for listening. It is such an honour and a pleasure to be here today with Maxine Linnell, who was a psychotherapist for 30 years and is a writer. I'm going to ask you about what books you're writing and everything. And also, I've met Maxine through the Living Well with Dementia program that I'm being trained to be a facilitator and is being run all over the country. It's an 8 to 10 week course for people that receive a diagnosis of dementia, and they go every week into a group where they learn about all the different support and facilities and aspects that you might face when being given a diagnosis. And I've met Maxine there because you're living with dementia, Maxine, and you come on the course and really inspirationally speak about your experience, and that it's a positive. It feels that it was positive. So for those that don't know me, my name is Anna Lempriere, and I am the podcast host for the Cornwall Memory Cafe Network on behalf of Disability Cornwall. And I interview all sorts of people, experts, professionals, people with lived experience, for us to just feel like we can learn from each other, share knowledge and information for people living with dementia and their carers. So thank you for your time, Maxine. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for asking me.
And just before we go into your story, will you tell us then, what are you writing at the moment?
Well, I started a blog when I first got diagnosed. And at that point, I felt there's a book here around what the experience was and what I was learning, because I was learning a lot, and that I didn't know whether I'd be able to complete a book about it. So what I decided to do was to publish pieces one by one as I wrote them. And then nearly 2 years on, I've realized, yes, I can write the book. I'm pretty sure I can write it. So I'm writing it. That's what it's about. It's about it's not just about me, it's about all the things that I've found out and the stories that I've heard, and my thoughts about it, because it's very complex and complicated and, well, as you know, complicated in the reactions to dementia and dementia itself. It's very, very complicated. And I think there's a lot to say that probably isn't said very often. So I'm hoping that it will get completed in the next year, and that I might find a publisher. We'll see.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, if anyone is listening as well that knows a publisher or is a publisher.
Yes.
I mean, the stats for dementia, what I know is something like 1 in 4 people are going to experience it. So to have the insight from a psychotherapist and somebody that's living with this, excuse me, it will be an incredible, moving insight. So keep going. What an inspirational thing to be doing.
Well, I think it also can be quite funny. I think it's really important that we bring some humour into all this, because otherwise it's just a terrible, devastating, they call it, situation to be in. So
Yeah.
I'm not trying to bring humour in. Humour comes. It just comes out of the
Yes.
situations. So yeah,
Yeah. Humour, a lightness of spirit, I'm feeling.
I hope so. Some of the
Yeah.
time.
Some of the time, exactly. Well, we're human as well, aren't we?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
well, shall we start then? Start the story of when, in your life, when you started to sort of experience different symptoms or different things that were happening that led you onto a diagnosis and that sort of thing, Maxine.
Yeah, just to give a bit of context,
Yeah.
I'd been interested in dementia for a long time and had read quite a lot and met quite a few people. And one of my closest friends, I was alongside while she discovered eventually that she was living with dementia, and all of that was like for her. And she died during lockdown.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So my reaction to that, well, there were lots of reactions, obviously, but one of them was that if ever I had a sense that something like this was happening, I wanted to know early on. That was really important to me. And so I actually said to the people who are close to me, if you ever see that happening, would you do tell me? Because we tend to go around saying, if someone says they've forgotten something or they're worried, we tend to go around saying, oh, it's all right. I do all that all the time. And
Yes,
so
we
that
do.
kind of ritual goes on of us all kind of reassuring each other. So that was the context when I just began to have odd things happening. I think the first was going to open the coat cupboard in my hall and having absolutely no idea what was going to be in it. Just opening the door and realizing that I had it completely gone. And the second one,
Gosh.
which was I found most disturbing was, and funny in a kind of way, it was that I went into the kitchen one night and found in the kitchen sink the washing up bowl full of water and the remote control for the TV in the water.
Okay.
I had absolutely no memory of that happening. There was nobody else it could have been because I live
No.
up there. And that to me was enough to say, this, you need to look at this. I mean,
Yeah.
the forgetting odd words, forgetting names, that's kind of harder to grasp and harder to, and I didn't mind that much about forgetting words and forgetting names. It didn't feel that important, but this particular one,
Yeah.
it really grabbed me and said, you've got to look at this. So that's how it
Absolutely.
happened. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's when I started going into it and working towards a diagnosis and just beginning to find out a lot more, because that's what I do. If there's something happens that's new and big, then I read a lot and
Yes.
I Google a lot and I find out a lot. And that's how I do things. So that's what I did with this. It became,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I mean, as a psychotherapist, that's looking in and wanting to understand and figure out and analyze and inquire. All of those are those qualities, aren't they?
Mhm. I think there are, and I think also I've always been interested in kind of different states of mind and how, particularly how we move from one to another. Because my sense is that all throughout our lives, we often say goodbye to one identity and one set of circumstances and form another one. I mean, we might become a mother, or we might become, I don't know, whatever, a new job, or lose somebody, or start a relationship, or start a new job. These things happen all the time, and we do transition them. And so I was interested in that transition. That was partly because of my friend and how terrified she was, and how long it took, because it was years before it got to the point where she had a diagnosis for all sorts of reasons. And I was interested, well, how do you negotiate this without being destroyed by it? I suppose that was not said it like that before, but it was something about that. Did I have to be destroyed for however long I'd got? Was that really the choice that I'd got, the only choice I'd got? And so that was another reason why I was really interested in what happened and curious.
Wow. I mean, and what a powerful perspective, that there is not just one way of looking at this. You know, like you use the language devastated, is that we're given a diagnosis, we're given a label, we're given a kind of an outcome of, this is what you've got. It's like a sentence, isn't it? You've got, you know, you might have 10 years, you might have whatever, and this is how it's going to unfold. And I'm hearing you saying, well, your fascination is that inquisitive curiosity on how could you live well? How could you live differently? How do you have to just take it as this devastating news?
Yeah. And I think that's like giving a life sentence. I mean, why would you want to spend... I mean, I was lucky in that I was diagnosed so early. So I had these choices. You know, it wasn't so far ahead that I didn't have choices. And so what was the question again? Because I just deviated.
Well, I didn't actually ask a question. I was just saying, you know, I liked your perspective around seeing that it doesn't have to be a life sentence.
Yeah. I think I'd already been a bit shocked and horrified by the kind of attitude and the terror that there is about having dementia. And from a lot of what I'd read, because I didn't just read the standard things, I really felt that there's something in our cultural memory or our cultural experience which kind of says this is what it is. And that part of what happens is that we've each all have got that, has got that. It's there, it's kind of locked in, because this is what we see in the media, this is how people talk about it. And so for quite a lot of us, we come into this process of moving towards a diagnosis already feeling really bad about ourselves, already frightened, already, I think, quite often ashamed and embarrassed or bad because we're forgetting something. And we may have those kinds of reactions from other people too, who are around us. And so it's very loaded, this whole thing. And I think it's very easy to underestimate how much that affects us. At the point when we're moving towards diagnosis. And it's almost like diagnosis is the cliff you fall off. And to me, that isn't it?
It's not the case.
People, it's for many people, it's not that, because it's been happening around, and we value language and talking and communicating and remembering it incredibly highly in our society. They don't do that everywhere.
Don't they?
Well, it's not necessarily the most important thing. So say I spent some time in South Africa teaching, and the attitude there was completely different. Now, there are downsides to that attitude, of course, but that sense is that that's not all of who we are. It's like here
Yeah.
we've got this sense of somebody having dementia and that sense of awareness and communication changing, and then we're not a person anymore.
Yeah.
And for me, there is right at the point towards the end stage or in the end stage and towards dying, there is still a person there.
Mm.
And just because we haven't learnt, most of us, a way of listening to somebody who isn't communicating in words,
Wow.
that we start to take away their sense of being a human being. And that's probably the most terrifying thing I can think about it, really. And that much more than whatever happens in the brain and what, all of that process. It's that there may be people around who kind of are denying that you exist. And I've
Gosh.
seen that happening. And say in the I bring it up again, I'm always bringing it up in the film that's being shown again on television now, that attitude that people die again and again.
Mm.
I don't accept that. I accept that
Okay.
people change
Yes.
and that we may need to adapt and
Yeah.
everyone around us may need to adapt, but I don't accept that that is a death, except at the point where any time we have to leave an identity behind, there is a loss,
Yeah.
but it's not a death.
Mm.
So I don't know if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I just want to come back to this thing
Mm.
of our society and Western society is so much our sense of worth, you were saying, is around, what you've accomplished in your career, your certificates, the letters after your name, or what and all of that. And what I'm hearing is you're sort of saying if that gets stripped away, there is still a human being, a soul, or uh, a life form experiencing the moment.
Yes. And in the same way, as far as I can see, we experience it very often in exactly the same way that we did before. So the communication skills may go, I can see some of my functionality has gone. There's all sorts of things that are moving, but I still feel the same when I meet someone and how they respond to me and everything else. And I do, because I'm involved in running a group for people living with dementia, a deep group. Then I meet people who are devastated because they are not allowed to drive anymore.
Yeah.
And it's a part of their identity that is incredibly painful to let go of.
Mm.
And I'm sure you've come across this. It feels like a huge deprivation.
Yeah.
And I'm not
Freedom.
judging that in any way, but we do put a big weight on things like driving and things like being able to do it yourself, whatever it is.
Yes, it is that, isn't it? It's the powers feel like your power is being taken away from you if you can't drive or if you can't answer for yourself or speak in certain ways. It's that
Yeah.
power of feeling like I'm going to lose my power.
Yes. And there's something I got to quite early on, which was, does it matter if I remember what happened yesterday? Does it really matter? How much does it matter? Why
Wow.
does it matter?
Yeah.
And that it can be really painful for people for that to happen. I have to
Mm.
look at my diary to find out what I did yesterday. Otherwise, I've got very little idea. But my response to that, on the whole, is to laugh about it. As you can
Yeah.
see, I mean, I know somebody who will say, when she's talking and she forgets something, she'll say, "I'll get back to you on that."
Lovely.
And that feels brilliant to me. It's just
Yeah.
like we don't just because, and I find a lot with the people I'm around that if that kind of conversational thing happens where someone said, "Oh, I went to the pub yesterday," and the other person says, "Oh, which pub was it? Or which village was it in?" And at that point, it's gone.
Yeah.
And at that point, that person may well fall off the cliff and feel absolutely dreadful and almost make that decision they're not going to try talking again.
Yeah.
And that is terrible, isn't it?
Yes.
That's where a lot of this isolation, I think, comes from.
Yeah.
Because we're so ashamed that we've forgotten something that doesn't matter, because the story about going to the pub doesn't matter where it was.
No. You're so right. And I think a lot of the time human beings are just looking for connections on, they want to know a pub because they want to see if they know the pub. And it's and really it's just I was taught because I'm a coach, and I was sort of taught that a lot of the time asking lots and lots of questions about the detail of, well, tell me about what is irrelevant.
Yes.
And that it can a lot of the time waste time, and that really you want to just get to what's underneath.
Yes.
What's really there that is special or needs the connection is what we're looking for. Why just
and you could tell the story of what happens in the pub without anybody needing to know. It's just that sort of small talk that is like the glue, isn't it, of that, as you're saying, that connection. And that's absolutely fine. But when you're faced with someone who actually doesn't have that access for whatever reason, is there any reason why we should say that they're not a human being and they're not exactly the same person that they were before? So my response to that has been to say it doesn't matter to me, and a lot of the things, and what are the things that I used to love doing? That's the question. So pre-diagnosis, I loved to do the garden. I loved to be quiet. And some of this were things that I aspired to, but I didn't give myself time to do. So ironically, now I can't do a lot of those and I get overwhelmed very easily. I can do more of what I wanted to do.
Isn't that lovely?
And that's not just me. I know quite a number of other people who are doing exactly the same thing and who are discovering things in themselves that they didn't know they could do before.
And kind wonderful.
You see, to me, if we had different attitudes towards this and we didn't, in a way, push someone out over the cliff ourselves, by valuing it so much and by kind of being so shaming or pitying or whatever it is that you pick up, then would someone have to feel that they were falling off the cliff?
Absolutely.
It's massive.
It's massive. This is the subject that I really wanted to get into, because it's the shaming, it's the pitying, it's the othering. It's like, oh, now you are out there and you're not as valuable. And it makes me think, when I think about myself all my life, or all my adult life, I've worked hard. It is very much a sort of cerebral, knowledge-based work, doing some manual labor, but that if I've really looked deeply, I would say I love to paint, I love to dance, I love to garden, I love philosophical conversation, and maybe, what a gorgeous thing to be able to get to a point where those parts of me might be more possible.
I think I mean, I'm not the only one who said to me, I feel better for having dementia. But
Gosh.
I kind of feel better, but it's really in spite of, rather than alongside, people who respond to me having it. And I suppose because the diagnosis came earlier, then when I started encountering people and their reactions, I was really shocked, because there I was, the same as I was yesterday. And so if you pick up what comes your way, it is of itself dehumanizing. So suddenly you're talked to as if you were somebody else, as if you were less than, as you say, other than, and all sorts of assumptions come out, all sorts of stereotypes. No blame for it. That's what we're shown.
Yeah.
That's what we see. That's what we learn.
Yes.
And that end stage is the bit that people pick up.
That's it. Do you, I mean, this is just fascinating. It's so insightful and beautiful. And wow. I mean, I wanted to ask, what age were you then when you received your diagnosis?
Yeah, I'm now 76, and it was 3 years ago.
73.
So 73.
Yeah.
And one of the lovely things, I think, is that when I saw a neurologist about the diagnosis, he said to me, well, the average age that women live in this country is till 85.
Okay.
And he said, you've probably got 10 years of good life. So that puts it into context, because heavens, there could be no dementia there, and I could live another 10 years. Am I going to put that away and say it's a waste?
Exactly.
Why would you do that? But it's almost like we put people in the rubbish bin because we've placed them somewhere. We've said, this is what you've got. You're no longer the person that you were. And so you've gone.
Yeah.
And it affects people a huge amount unless there's something which balances that out.
Yes.
With saying it doesn't have to be like that.
This is very isolating. All of a sudden it can be very isolating, I would imagine.
Yeah, and when you do meet people, quite often I found, especially if it wasn't people who I knew, and I'm sorry to say it was quite a lot of professionals as well, and volunteers in the dementia world, I suddenly was a kind of supplicant. And I was suddenly receiving treatment or receiving services, or having to ask for things, being treated as if I wasn't an adult, as if I couldn't think for myself.
Wow.
And in a way that starts to go in. So at the end of, say, a phone call where that's what's happening to me, I found there's an hour after that when I'm actually having to recover from it. And it can happen really simple ways. That last week it happened to me, and it happened because I was contacting somebody, and at some point it was somebody working in an official capacity, not a health capacity, and I needed to say that I had dementia. And so I said it, and immediately she said, "Oh, bless you." And that sounds like a really kind thing to say.
Yeah.
But I was immediately thrown into, oh, what does she think I am? And what does she think living with dementia is like or about. Is it all about totally downhill and all terrible and, oh, you know, this is a death sentence? And that I've just seen lots of people who have let that, who, well, haven't been able to help letting that affect, because we are a reflection of how we're seen, aren't we? We
Absolutely
pick that up so much. And I think the way that's helped me, that supported me more than anything, is to meet other people who have dementia.
Yes.
More than meeting professionals who knew all about it. Because there's something about how that's delivered, or the medicalization, the complete medicalization of it. When I think a lot of things, we get worse because partly of those reactions and those. So there's the thing that I discovered was that when I talked with other people who are living with dementia, partly we don't talk about dementia all the time. It's not the center of our worlds. We have a really good laugh. We talk about the rest of our lives, and it's not like we're hiding dementia, but we all know we're in the same place. No one is at the outside trying to make us better or trying to make us feel okay about ourselves. We can just be okay about ourselves. And because I met through the Deep Network groups where it was just us, it was a huge insight. So I met people who've been living with dementia for 10, 15 years. And functioning pretty well, and still functioning pretty well, and doing some amazing things. I mean, I'm sure you've come across Wendy Mitchell, because most of us has. The writer, she was living with dementia, and she wrote 3 books about it, which have been real turning points for lots of people. She died last year, just about a year ago now, and her insight and her experience of living with it they made a lot of difference to me when I was looking at it, and I know they have for other people. So people like that,
and people like you,
well, it breaks down that whole barrier of, well, someone living with dementia couldn't write a book.
of course. Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's
so well, what I heard when you were saying that little story about the person saying bless you is that I can really relate, that I might say that. And I can really relate that if someone said to me, oh, I've had a diagnosis of cancer, I would say bless you. Like and why I'm saying that is I think we don't know, we are so clumsy. Human beings are so clumsy with language, and we have no idea how to respond non-violently or respond well. We're, you know, death, anything like that. It's just, we're so clumsy.
And some of it, I think, is to do with kind of internally thinking, I don't know how to relate to that. I'm frightened when I relate to that, because and so almost that person who is experiencing those things, I feel frightened of. I want to step back from them.
I agree.
There's a real reluctance to, okay, can I meet this person? Can I get who they are? Can I learn from them? Can I, enjoy their company? And instead it's, I don't know what to say. I want to escape. I'll get it wrong, and that's the other thing.
That's the thing, isn't it?
Okay, it's and that has a huge impact on the person experiencing it. I think that does get underestimated, because it seems to me that every single time that kind of response comes,
Yeah.
it eats away at anything confident that's there. It eats away at the
Yes.
positive side of it.
And I thought the language that you used was like dehumanizing. It's like
Yeah.
you become dementia. You're the
Yes.
the dementia person.
Yeah.
You're not a soul, a human. It's you're the label, and you're
It's a bit like,
dehumanized.
it's a bit like a filter. And filter comes down at that point where we say the word,
Yeah.
and you're seen through that filter. And
Yeah.
so, and there's no way, and we can't help it, because that's the thing we've received about dementia. That is the experience that we're told about, the story we're told about it. So there's no harm in that, but knowing what the effect is, what the impact is, and it stops us from discovering a way of, well, what would it be like for me? Or it stops us from receiving something about it, as well as what it takes away from the person who is experiencing it. And so that's a loss for everyone. But
It really is.
in terms of being around other people who are experiencing the same thing, you never get that, because we are all aware of how much that affects us. There's another friend who says, I love these little stories, because one of the things we get is, you don't look like you've got dementia. I get to say to them, you don't look like you've got dementia. And I kind of think, what do I have to do in order to look like it? But her response is to say to them, you don't look like you're stupid.
Wow.
And that is pretty tough thing to say, but it kind of says that.
It wakes them up a little bit.
Yes, it's kind of, what are you saying when you say that? You don't look like my version of what dementia is.
Yeah.
And what's that doing to you and to the other person?
Yeah.
I think sometimes I think it's absolutely chilling that
Really
happens
is.
all the time.
Yes.
And so unnecessary. And sometimes it gets fed at us from all sorts of places where you wouldn't expect it to come from.
And it's huge. It feels like it's really sort of an unconscious saturation within society's collective perspectives on things.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think about a year in, I was reading, the Saturday papers or something, and one of those interviews with people, and one of the questions was that they asked everybody was, what are you most frightened of? And I think probably 20 years ago, the answer would have been cancer, or the answer would have been dying. But these two people, celebrities of some kind, said the thing they were most afraid of was having dementia. And you think, okay, dementia has now got that place. Why ever? I don't know. There's all sorts of reasons, probably. But it's been given that slot, which says this is the worst.
Yeah.
And
you're a testament to I've interviewed so many people now on this podcast, maybe at least 20, I think. And this has by far been the most philosophical, insightful conversation that I've had, Maxine. And it's, I do. I think it's a really concerning perspective to be so, for society to be so afraid of that diagnosis of dementia and the loss And yeah, it doesn't seem like there's much loss.
Well, I think there doesn't have to be. I don't know how I'm going to feel in 10 years' time. I mean, I don't want to make it sound as if it can't be difficult, but I still
Yeah.
feel somewhere, and the stories I know from people who experience that late stage, say, where
Yeah.
they still feel connected, their partners still feel connected to them, that
Mm.
certainly one I know of actually began to talk when she hadn't spoken for a few years, when her daughter suddenly got that she could listen to a finger moving.
Say more.
Well, this was a friend of mine who we both went to a workshop in London that was about being with people who were in a coma or the late stages of dementia. So it was about both of those. And I mean, fascinating idea. How do we do that? And how do we do it in a way that's actually meeting the person, not just sort of blanketing them or saying we have to sing a song to them, or
Yes,
those
yes,
sorts of things.
yes.
And singing a song is fine, but where do we really connect up? And
Mm.
so in this workshop, what it was saying was what I was saying just now, that if you see a finger moving, what you can do is say, I see your finger moving, looks a bit like you're feeling X, Y, or Z. Or I wonder if, when I connect with that, I feel like it might be X, Y, and Z. And
Mm.
quite often what will happen at that stage is the finger will move more.
Wow.
And she went back and they showed films of this happening. And of course you think, well, is that really true? She went back to her mother, who was in her 90s, had late dementia, wasn't doing anything, was lying in the bed, not able to eat, hadn't spoken for a few years. And she started practicing this way of being with her. I refuse to
Wow.
call it a technique. It's a way of being with someone
Yes.
and really noticing, I can see what you might feel. Are you feeling whatever it is, angry, upset, frightened, and enter that place with them. And her mother started talking. And they had for her, was the most meaningful talks almost that they'd ever had.
Wow.
And everyone around was astonished. But then you kind of think, well, why are we astonished about that? It's
Yeah.
because we've sort of put people into a box,
Yeah.
whatever you call the boxes, and we
Yeah.
kind of want them to stay there.
Oh, this is because we're talking soul to soul, aren't we? We're talking consciousness to consciousness,
Yeah.
not just this part of the brain that is words and sounds. You know, people might laugh, but some talk to animals, some talk to trees, some, there's a way of communicating non-verbally
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
There's so much, isn't there? And I think as soon as, I can imagine if you've got that judgment, okay, that person's written off now, they've got dementia, so there's no point anymore, then that's there you go, there's the barrier. And not being able to communicate, you would kind of, if people didn't want to communicate with you over and over and over again, or
Yeah.
you would shut down, wouldn't you?
Of course. Of course. And some of it, as you say, is what's happening to the brain. But I think it's more as well. It's a bit like, another cliff that I think there is that when you've got a diagnosis, your emotions become symptoms.
Oh, okay.
So if you feel anxious, this isn't with everybody, obviously, but if you feel anxious, then you've got anxiety. And quite often what we'll do is kind of give someone some medication to get them to feel less anxious. Well, my response to that is, wouldn't you feel anxious? Wouldn't anybody feel anxious when this is what's happening to them? And
Yeah.
so why, how are we not responding to that? Well, we're not responding to it because it's become a symptom. And it particularly stands out with anger. And the way that can be called challenging behavior.
Yeah.
Now, I find that really difficult because, again, why would you not be angry when somebody won't let you get out of the building? You're in a locked room, you can't do what you want to do. I mean, why would you not be angry?
Absolutely.
And certainly someone I know said to me, because her father is living with dementia, she said, he's so angry. And I said, what was he like before his diagnosis? And she said, he was always angry.
Wow.
And she said, I wish he didn't have the angry dementia. I wish he had the quiet dementia.
Ooh.
So what are we doing? We're saying you're
Yeah.
fine as long as you are grateful, as long as you smile, as long as you're
In
quiet
your
and
own world,
neat.
disconnected and just
Yeah,
quiet.
yeah.
Yeah.
Then you're all right. And of course, a lot of women are used to doing that. That's another thing. We're used to being nice,
Yes.
and that isn't so held back in men. So often it's men who display what we call challenging behavior. As soon as we call it challenging behavior, who's being challenged here?
Yeah.
And to me, it has to be the person who's on the other end of that. And what we do is, okay, we give that to the person. So we say, you have challenging behavior. And one of the things we do to that is try to stop it instead of listening to it and seeing what are the feelings in there.
Yeah.
And
What's underneath? What's deep?
yes,
What's
what's
underneath?
underneath.
Yeah.
And what is, of course you feel frustrated and angry. How could you not?
Yeah.
And so can I listen to that and can I respond to it in a way that isn't trying to just stop it or that isn't seeing it as a symptom?
Gosh. Yeah. I mean, you were saying even the part about you having the way somebody treating you on the telephone and feeling straight away, okay, I feel slightly unhuman now. And thinking I've got to get away now and process that and somehow come back to harmony within myself. And then you wonder if that's repeatedly occurring, like being spoken to like you're an other, you're unhuman anymore. You're worthless now, and all these things. No wonder you'd feel upset or anxious or paranoid or angry. If that was consistently occurring, perhaps.
Yeah, yeah. And in a way, that would be at least as healthy as feeling like you had to be quiet and submissive and hide all those feelings. So,
Yes.
what are we doing by saying these feelings aren't important or to be listened to? And I know, say, particularly
Massive.
within people who are getting towards working in a person-centered way, that kind of is getting close to it. But I know for myself, one of the things that's happening is that my feelings are getting stronger. So under stress, I am expressing anger more than I probably would have.
Interesting.
And I think that's partly because the feeling part of our brain is kind of a bit magnified. We're less able to do the cognitive side. So suddenly we're faced with much more immediate, strong feelings. And certainly for me, they don't get hidden nearly as much as they might
Well,
have done
again,
before.
if we're thinking that society says it's unacceptable to have feelings, and that we're sort of taught that we've got to keep ourselves, everything's got to be buttoned up and put in the right place, and all of that. And then if you're getting to a certain age where that part of the brain, that sort of functioning, civilized part of the brain is worn out, it's exhausted from having to pretend. And now some more truth is coming out.
Yeah. And if you feel frightened enough about what's happening around you to feel the only way I can be is to withdraw and smile and accept, then what we're doing is adapting to our circumstances. It's not a symptom, it's an adaptation, which is probably a great idea because it works, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It really works. And those people tend to be, I hear people saying, "Oh, she's wonderful. She smiles all the time." And there's a bit inside me that goes, "Well, hang on here. Is that really what's happening? Or is that what we want to see?" And so there's all this stuff about, okay, you've fallen off a cliff. You've kind of died in a way.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we're being told, "Oh, you must live well and be really positive." You go, "Oh, okay, how am I going to fit those two together?" And that's impossible, isn't it? How can you do that? We can't. But those are two really strong messages. That's what we have to do in our lives. We think positively, and you live well with dementia. That, although the thought behind that is, I'm sure, coming from a really caring place, there's still questions about it. That because if you're told to live well, it's a bit like being told you've got to smile, and you've got to do the right activities, you've got to do all this. And certainly for me, there's a way I'll kick at that. I say, don't you tell me what is good for me. You listen to me and other people and think what is good for them. And the only thing you can do is ask them, really, isn't it? You can't just blanket say, "Now go away and live with the dementia," because that's what you hope will happen, and then it'll go away.
Yes.
Or the person will go away.
Wow.
Sorry, it's just
Gosh, my brain
is talking about it.
My brain is absolutely boggled in it, and I feel like I could talk to you forever. It's really, really, really inspiring and insightful. And I know that people listening to this, it's going to really get them questioning, and hopefully in wherever they are, they will be able to learn a different way of communication, see differently, see a different way. And I just wanted to ask you, you mentioned you mentioned your own group. Is there anything, reading material, groups, or anywhere, websites, or anything that you could recommend to the listeners if they have a loved one with dementia, or if somebody's listening and they've had a diagnosis and that they want a little bit of what you're sharing about and want a little bit more hope, I would say, if that
and I think it's important. Again, you don't give people hope what's the hope for? Well, I'm hoping it goes away. I'm hoping it, what are we saying when I want to say we want to give hope? I think the hope comes from inside us as we start to adapt and change alongside the dementia, rather than fighting it and pushing away the possibilities that there might be. So you asked about books and websites and so on. I mean, the books that meant so much to me were Wendy Mitchell's books, and I would highly recommend them. They're very honest, they're very human, they're very open, and very
We'll put
readable.
the link in, we'll put her books in the links,
And I suppose the place that I've found most is, which I've mentioned, I think, the Deep Network.
The Deep Network.
Yeah, it stands for Dementia Engagement and Empowerment Project.
Wow.
So it is what it says on the tin. And it's very much about people living with dementia being in the front and leading, rather than being led and being done to. So there are deep groups all around the country. There's, I think, 80 over the UK. And there are some online things. And there's Dementia Diaries, which is people talking about what happens to them. So that's something I'd really recommend.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So I don't know if those two.
And what about if people wanted to follow your blog or anything like that as well?
Yeah, well, that's MaxineLinnell.com. And you're very welcome to come onto it, and there's quite a lot in there now, so you can actually read, because it basically follows the process that I've been in learning. And I'm hoping that I'll carry on with that, and there'll be more learning from it. So, yeah, I think the other book I'd recommend, and it's quite difficult for me to recommend it because I partly wrote it, is a book called Knowledge is Power. And that is online. You can pick it up online, and it's written. There's an English one and a Scottish one and a Welsh one. It's written for people living with dementia.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things around are written for people caring for, people supporting, and people living with dementia, but they come last. And the assumption is that we can't read. That's another one.
Okay.
So this is written by a group of people living with dementia for people living with dementia. And it's a mix of where are the resources that you can find that are going to help, all sorts of things that will help. I mean, the thing I've found most is travel assistance, which is just brilliant. But people don't know about it quite often, that there can be somebody who can take you from one platform to another and will help you find a seat. Wow. That's just wonderful. Okay. So it spreads along a lot of things, as well as kind of saying, this isn't the end. We're here, we're in it. You don't have to pick up that it's the end for you and it's only the other people who will be addressed. And of course, ironically, lots of other people read it too.
Yes.
So the fact that
the knowledge is power. If I type in Maxine Linnell,
probably not, because I'm not front and center of that.
Okay.
If you type in probably the Deep Network or Innovations in Dementia, which is the group that really started the Deep Network.
Okay.
So that would be the way to access that. But maybe you could find the website and then link into it for other people.
And thank you so much for your wisdom and insight. And it's been wonderful hours spent, Maxine. Thank you.
This video was produced by Discover Voices, part of Disability Cornwall and Isles of Scilly. To check out all of our content, simply search Discover Voices on YouTube.